Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's Open Census webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about the space management techniques organizations can introduce to help accommodate more people within existing office spaces. My name is David Thomas, and I'll be hosting today's session. Before we get started, I want to quickly touch on why we're running this particular session. And it's largely due to the conversations we've been having over the past couple of months with existing customers and prospects across all industries and locations who are all kind of experiencing the same challenges when it comes to managing increasing headcount without trying to actually expand their real estate footprint. We've all seen the impact the rise of flexible work in the post-pandemic era has had on the workplace, kind of throwing its role and function into slight uncertainty. This uncertainty, however, hasn't stopped other key businesses from going ahead, and many organizations are still growing or planning to grow over the next few years. But with this kind of new uncertainty surrounding corporate real estate investments and the lack of certainty in what emerging work patterns are going to be dominant, there is a new challenge for the teams responsible for the workplace in managing growth in the spaces they currently have and making it far more efficient. Historically, organizations have tended to adopt a somewhat top-down approach to space management, in which the organization itself was kind of treated as a homogeneous monolith in which departments were treated the same way, with very little space for nuance. Typically, one-to-one desk ratios were the norm, with potentially some hot desks made available on the side. Now, with space being a far more valuable commodity, this approach doesn't work, and organizations are realizing that they kind of need to be looking at space on a more micro level, understanding the needs of individual teams and departments to ensure that they can work effectively and that space isn't going to waste. Organizations and teams are kind of realizing that badge entry data alone isn't enough when it comes to managing capacity in space, and you need far more data to actually make the necessary changes. And that's why we're here today to share with you some guidance on the steps that you can take to prepare offices for growth and also the data points behind them. So I'm quickly going to go through what it is that we're actually going to be touching on today. And firstly, I'm going to tell you kind of how you can gauge your current occupancy levels and utilization levels so that you have a benchmark to work from when you're planning changes. Next, we're going to look at introducing the appropriate person-to-desk ratios, work rotations, and asset provision, and the data points that you need to be looking at to make sure that those are done correctly. And then finally, we're going to finish up by looking at the importance of some new emerging technologies, such as kind of booking solutions to help improve access to the workplace, to make sure that increasing numbers of people can access and find the spaces that they need easily. So to get started, I'm just going to quickly take you through how it is that we gather data here at Open Census. And we're an IoT company, so Internet of Things software provider, and we build a kind of end-to-end managed network in which sensors connect to gateways via LoRaWAN, which are like long-range radio, so it's completely separate to your Wi-Fi or existing IT infrastructure. And then these gateways transport the data into the cloud, where our analytics platform, which you'll see some examples of soon, processes the data and gives you the results. Within these networks, we use a variety of different types of sensors, depending on the use case. So we have individual desk PIR sensors, which monitor heat and motion, and these are kind of deployed on desks or phone booths, anywhere that an individual might work. And then we have footfall counters, and these are used to kind of monitor more open spaces or floors as a whole, or in some cases, larger conference-style meeting rooms, where lots of people are coming in and out. And then we also have room counters, which do the same thing, but on a smaller scale, telling you how many people are in a room. And then we have environmental sensors as well, but we're not really going to be touching on them today. And these sensors are all deployed, and they're put throughout offices to tell people kind of how assets are being used throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. And they're not kind of there just static. They're tagged, is how we call it. Any way that you can think of to differentiate your spaces, you can then tag these sensors so that you can then pull comparisons and see which assets are performing best, which ones are being underused. And in front of you, you've got some examples of this. So desks can be tagged by whether they're kind of sit, stand, the department they belong to, where in the building they are, what floor, what building themselves, what team they belong to. And rooms are similar, so they can be done by capacity, ability to book, do they have audio-visual equipment, that kind of thing. And these tags become very important when you're actually dealing with quite tight spaces, because you want to make sure that you have the right spaces to be used and that no spaces are kind of being underutilized, because especially when headcounts is growing, underutilized space is just wasted, and it should be, you kind of should be thinking, what can we replace this with that would be more useful to the employees themselves and fits their new style of working. So hopefully that's the context of how we work out of the way. So let's get into setting your benchmark levels or working out where you currently stand. So the first thing you need to do when you're trying to fit more people into a space is work out actually how much space is there available. And on a very high level, you can do this using some very, very well key but simple metrics. And that's kind of looking at averages and underused assets. So what you can see here in front of you is the utilization of one of our clients across their seats and rooms over a month period. So 29th of the 6th to 29th of the, 3-month period, 29th of the 6th to the 27th of the 9th. And this is showing that they have quite a lot of underused desks. So they could fit more people in there, but we're already seeing a problem here in that there aren't that many unused rooms. So if you did suddenly increase headcount by say 200 people, they might be able to come in and find a desk, but the likelihood of them being able to come in and actually find a meeting room to conduct their meetings, that's very low. So here you can see that there is space, but it's not very well balanced at the moment. And if you wanted to go a bit deeper, we can go ahead and use footfall counters, which we spoke about before. And the way that you can use these to kind of gauge the overall occupancy of a building is by putting them on the entrances and exits of all your floors and see which spaces are being used most, which spaces are potentially being used less, and which have kind of space to expand into, and how this is going ahead over time. This is kind of a good place to start to identify on a high level which spaces have the most potential for expansion, or which spaces are kind of emptiest at the moment, so where should we be focusing our attention on? And once you have this clarified, you can go a step deeper and then use these desk PIR sensors on the assets on those floors. And then here you can see on each floor how many free or underused desks there are in each space. So in a more detailed kind of view of what we saw before, what can actually be played with on that floor to fit more people in. We kind of sometimes suggest to people that when they go ahead with these projects, that you start with quite a wide view and slowly focus down as you become aware of the kind of issues that you're facing or the extent of the issues that you have in your office. Sometimes if you dive right in at the deep end, it can be quite overwhelming, and you can have more data than you know what to do with at the very beginning. So having these incremental plans of identifying a problem and then slowly building into it can be the best way forwards in that sense. So that's how you would identify your benchmark and see where you currently stand. And then the first way to actually then start fitting more people in or making sure that space is appropriately allocated is to look at a departmental kind of level view of your space. And this is done through the tagging that we mentioned earlier. So each asset or desk can be kind of attributed to a department. And then you can see here, so this one's looking at a month, and this is saying how many desks belonging to these departments were used in that month. And then also here in the red, how they've changed since the month beforehand. So you can see which departments are growing, which departments are shrinking, or which ones are staying roughly the same. And that's how you can kind of get a view of demands on space and start to sort of play Tetris with your space. So making sure that there's the right people fitting into the right places, and no one has too little space, and no one also has space going spare. Because in the current environment, empty space is just wasted money at the moment. So that's looking at it on a department level. And then the same data gathered through the sensors, through the desk sensors and the room sensors, can tell you how many of each asset should be kind of what ratio. So whether it's an IT department who's in all day, they probably need a fixed desk. So you're going to need to have a certain number of desks just allocated to them. But then other teams will be working in a far more flexible way throughout the week, coming in maybe once or twice. So you can then have a variety of mobile or semi-mobile or semi-fixed spaces. And these can be a variety of either bookable spaces that you can book in advance, or purely kind of wide open hot desking areas that people can come down to and touch down any time. And building up these kind of proportions of asset allocation in this way means that people are more able to work in the way that suits them, and it will be a better use of space because there'll be far fewer one-to-one desks just sitting empty throughout the week, because they'll have been converted into either a sharing space or a bookable space. So that's some mobility profiles, and these are kind of one of the best ways of making sure that assets are going to be used effectively, because it's just helping reduce actual empty space as people aren't using their assets. And then the next way that we can look at making sure that space is being appropriately used is meeting rooms. So if you remember the first slide that I showed you, there are a lot of available desks, but not very many seats, not very many rooms available. And this is often because rooms aren't used effectively. They'll be used a lot, but it might not be for the purpose that they were designed for. So in this top graph, we can see the occupancy, how often this room was in use, an example 6-person room throughout the day. And it's in use a lot, 5.5 hours a day, this room is being used, and 8 hours on its busiest day. But then when you look at this second graph at the bottom, you can see that it was on average only occupied by 3 people. So this 6-person room is not being used effectively and could, in fact, be repurposed to a more efficient usage. So if you did want to increase the number of people in the office and provide them with the actual meeting space as well, you'd be better off splitting this room into 2 smaller ones so there's more spaces for people to conduct small meetings. And the way that we do this here is through our right sizing calculator. So when you know your entire array of meeting rooms and you know their capacity, you know how often they're in use throughout the day, and you know how many people are in them, you can then actually start to look at what would be a better array of meeting rooms to accommodate those people and what you could do with that extra space. So here it's quite clear that these rooms are not being used effectively because they have no rooms for 2 people, but based on the data of how people are using the existing space, they think there should be 10. So what this says is that the meetings they have got there, which are larger, are not being used effectively. There's only a couple of people going in there at any one time. And that will be these 12 people rooms or these 10 people rooms. This is saying that they need far fewer of them, and you're not having very many 10 people rooms meetings or 12 people meetings. And this is largely due to the kind of blend in nature of meetings at the moment. So people will confirm they're going to a meeting, but you won't know if they're working from home or working from the office. You'll turn up to a meeting that's confirmed for 10 people, but there'll only be 2 or 3 of you there and everyone else will be remote. So this is saying that to fix that and make space more effectively used, switch to more small people meeting rooms and get rid of the larger ones. And then you have a lot more freed up space to repurpose and fit more people in. The third way that we, I think the third way that we can make space more effective is similar to the mobility profiles, but it goes back to the tagging, and it's kind of looking at which type of space is being used most and which ones aren't. So similar to department levels here, you can see which type of space is being used most, which ones are being used more over the last period of time, and which ones are being used less. And the purpose of this is to see how your employees are wanting to work and providing more of those types of spaces, and also which ones are potentially not being very popular. So the library space here and the tech bar, they're decreasing in utilization. So if that continues for a couple of months, it might be worth looking at repurposing that space to something that is actually more popular, like the shared tables. And by doing this, you're allowing a headcount to grow because you're not providing space which is just going to sit empty. More people doesn't necessarily mean that these spaces will be used, because they might just not have a purpose for how this organization wants to work. So it's always best to shape your workplace around how people actually choose to work when they're in the office, and listen and see what they're doing and make your decisions based on that, not what you assume that they're going to be doing. So it's always best to kind of follow the data, follow the evidence, and provide what that is showing. And that's what this data here can do for you. And with these tags and like sensors, you can search for them and compare them and see which ones are changing over time, and make sure that you're actually kind of, the changes that you've made have been successful, and see what the trends are that you need to be kind of looking out for, and making sure, again, that people have the right amount of spaces that they want, and so that they can use it effectively. The final thing that we're going to talk about today, and I'm aware that we are pushing on time, is how to actually increase access to the workplace. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by introducing a booking tool. If people are coming into the office and it's a challenge to find the spaces they want, they might start to get frustrated with it. So if they have a way of in advance kind of making sure that if they come in, they're going to have the space they need, they can get the rooms they need, the desks they need throughout the day, and that will just mean that the spaces will be effectively used. And it also means that if they want to come in and they can see the spaces that aren't available, then they're not going to waste a journey and not going to have that frustration. The Open Sensors booking tool is integrated with the sensors itself, which can lead to a lot of pretty helpful kind of automation. So the sensors can detect if someone hasn't turned up to their booking and re-release it, and it similarly can detect when you do turn up to your booking and check in automatically, so there's no need to kind of log into it or anything like that. It also means that you're more able to put your departmental findings into practice, because you can set in people's user settings what departments they can book for, and this correlates to the tags on the sensors, so that as you start to play that kind of Tetris game with your spaces, this is then kind of semi-enforced by the booking tool. So people can only use the spaces allocated to them. And then as you view how these spaces are utilized, you know that the changes you made are either effective or not, and they can have more space or less space, exactly how like you kind of see it going into practice. So that's the end of today's session. If you do have any questions, please do get in touch. And if not, we'll be running a further session next month, so keep an eye on your inbox for the invite to that one. Thank you very much. Cheers.